So I recently bought my very first Apple computer and it's been great. So great, in fact, I thought I'd double down on the ecosystem and get myself my very first iPad. I went to Best Buy and saw they had 9th generation iPads for sale. They also had 10th generation iPads for sale. They also had iPad minis, iPad Airs, and iPad Pros. This wasn't easy as I thought. I hate buying the wrong thing, and I've noticed with Apple, well, it's very easy to overbuy. So I quickly watched a bunch of YouTube videos talking about the latest models, and it actually made me more confused. But after my on-the-fly research, I decided to buy the 5th generation iPad Air, mostly because it has Apple's M1 silicon chip. After all, these new silicon chips have really been why the Apple computers have been crushing it in recent years, right? So I wanted to future-proof my purchase by ensuring the iPad has this chip, even though it was quite a lot more than I wanted to spend. I believe it came to $900 Canadian after tax without a case, basically double the price of the iPad 9th gen. Now, my research told me the 9th generation iPad was the best deal value-wise, but it was released in September of 2021. And let's be honest, when you're buying tech brand new, it's hard to buy older tech. With that being said, the iPad Air came out in March of 2022, so it's not that much newer than the 9th gen. So it's been around a while too, but again, it came with that awesome new M1 chip. That's what I told myself to feel better about spending all that money anyway. Okay, so I get it home, I play with it. It's fantastic. I use it mostly for browsing Reddit, Facebook, Netflix, and my main game Hearthstone, as well as some other apps, but it runs everything very well. For the record, my wife has the 8th gen iPad and she does the exact same things and plays the exact same games as me with basically the same performance. Interesting. Now, if you know me, you will know I am a huge fan of buying things used. Since I'm often on Marketplace, I ended up finding a used 10th gen iPad, which came out on October 2022, by the way, so 6 months later than the iPad Air. It also came with the Apple Pencil, which I've always kind of wanted, and the deal was for $450, so half the price of the Air new. Well, that seemed like a much better deal than the Air, so for science and because I was within the return window, I bought the used 10th gen iPad, brought it home, played with it, and it's great. Now, I wanted to make this video for anyone out there who needs to know just which one to buy, because I've watched reviews on YouTube and all the tech people made it seem like the base models weren't very good and that the extra money was worth it for the Air or for the Pro. Sure, the iPad Air on paper has more cores, newer M1 chip, better screen, but honestly, as someone who has probably more than average demands for specs, I don't really notice the difference between the iPad Air and the regular iPad in my daily usage. I do video editing for my channel and some gaming, and while it's always nice to have better performance, the iPad 10th generation offers great performance. The iPad 8th generation offers great performance. Like, imagine someone saying to you, your TV could have faster performance. You'd be like, sweet, but my TV shows look just fine. And that's what Apple does, which is both good and bad. They pump out new models very quickly, which makes your older model feel obsolete in a way, but since it's just such minuscule upgrades year after year, your one that was a couple years old is probably still more than capable for today's apps and programs. When I see most people in my life using tablets, they're shopping, they're browsing social, watching videos, using FaceTime. Heck, my wife's 8th gen still does all this stuff amazingly well, with sick battery life to boot. Let's be real, the quality of our shows and demands for the apps has kind of peaked over the last few years. We aren't using new apps, it's the same old ones. And until something radically different comes out that we all use in our daily lives, we're gonna have marginal hardware updates over previous year's models that don't affect our day-to-day. What I'm saying is, if you don't have a ton of experience with iPads over the last 5 years or so, pretty much any one you buy will be more than good enough for you. It's easy to get analysis paralysis when shopping for these things because there's so many models to choose from and you want to pick the right one. I get it. Get the one that fits your budget. Don't even worry about the other ones. You'll be happy. Here's the only real difference I've noticed. For some reason, Apple decided to put the camera on the side of the iPad 10th generation instead of on the top. What a strange choice considering it's always been on the top. I think it was a really weird choice. It doesn't feel comfortable for me FaceTiming holding it sideways, especially since most people don't have the 10th gen iPads. So now when you FaceTime with people who are holding it upright, Now it's at an odd angle, but you can still hold it vertically, but then the angle with the camera on the side isn't very flattering at all. So for that reason alone, if you plan on using FaceTime a lot and like to hold it upright in that situation like most people, get the older 9th gen, or if you want to spend the extra money, get the Air if you can afford it. Otherwise, the iPad 10th generation is just fantastic for the right price. The only other real thing to consider is whether or not you want to use the Apple Pencil. If you know you would buy a 2nd generation pencil, you need an Air, Pro, or the newest iPad mini. For some reason, only the Gen 1 pencils work on regular iPads. I have the Pencil Gen 1, and it does work a tiny bit better on the newer screen of the Air, but it still works great on the iPad 10. So I'd rather save $450 buying it used and use that money to buy something else, or just to pay some bills. I'm also comparing the value I get from these iPads to the Samsung S6 Lites that my kids have, which are at a similar price point. And I have to say, the iPads are just a little bit nicer and easier to use. I do love that the Samsungs come with a pen and the screen and build quality is nice, but Apple just seems so far ahead when it comes to the build quality, the battery, the ease of use, and not to mention the amount of options for accessories like cases, etc. I considered a Samsung tablet for myself, but because I just got the new MacBook Pro and how far Apple seems ahead with the pad design just as far as refinement, I think the iPads are still the right choice. Having gone through all of this after having bought these 2 iPads and then using my wife's 8th gen iPad while making this video, I think if you want to get an iPad right now, don't even worry about the specs or having the latest model. They've been making iPads for so long now, they're all good. My wife's 8th generation one is still sweet. I'd honestly be happy if I had to use that every day. Get the one where the cost, the screen bezel, and the camera placement makes sense to you. Otherwise, the M1 chip isn't as much of a game changer as I thought that it would be. Not as big of a difference as it is for the computers. I spent so much time wondering and researching if I should get the latest tech, worrying I bought the wrong one, and then I did. I bought too much for my needs. Damn you, Apple! I just spent a lot of money buying the new M3 MacBook because there, for having productivity, having the latest and greatest matters. I coughed up the dough for that because my older computer couldn't quite handle the kind of video editing that I do. If, like me, you are buying an iPad to do just kind of the same thing you do on your phone but want a bigger screen, honestly, the performance and quality of all the iPads nowadays is just so good. Chances are you'll be happy with every one of them, even that 9th gen one that's for sale at Costco. Don't spend the extra money when you don't have to. Is it nice to have the newer models? Of course it is. I love tech. I love researching everything I can and buying things that make life better or more interesting. But you don't need to spend the extra money in this case for just regular use. So depending on what's for sale or the deal you can get right now, any of the iPads released in the last couple years are more than likely good enough for you. The only real things to keep in mind when iPad shopping are number 1, your budget, number 2, the features you need or want, like camera placement, which Apple Pencil is compatible, etc. And number 3, the support. Apple seems to support products for between 5 and 7 years. So if you are buying a product that is already 2.5 years old, well, it might not get support for that long. Something to keep in mind if you're planning on not upgrading for years to come. And for anyone that's maybe had an iPad from 7 or 8 years ago, you know that you can't always get the latest games or apps because they can't be installed on older versions of the operating system, and that can be frustrating. After buying both the iPad Air 5th gen and the iPad 10th gen, and after using my wife's 8th gen, I would say the extra hundreds of dollars weren't worth the upgrade based on how I use the tablets. I didn't notice much difference in the batteries, and even though the screen is technically better on the Air, I didn't notice much of a difference when watching shows in the dark. The speakers on all of them were loud enough, the performance was snappy enough for all the latest apps. I do think the camera placement sucks on the iPad 10th gen, but it doesn't really matter to me because of how little I use FaceTime. Sure, there are more nitty-gritty specs we could get into, but unless you know what you need or you want a massive screen like that's on the Pro, or you have specific apps you're gonna use, you probably have similar needs to the rest of us. The reason I went with the 10th gen over the 9th gen was because of the deal that I got. I do like the newer bezel on the screen, I think it looks slick, but honestly, if I would have found a good deal on a used 9th gen or even 8th gen, I would have been more than happy with that too. Most YouTube videos I've watched didn't really seem to recommend the 10th generation iPads. I'm really happy with the 10th generation one that I found for a good deal, and I think anybody would. But if I had to buy one new right now and the 9th gen was on sale, I'd probably get that. And FYI, I got a cheap case on Amazon, and I really do love having the Pencil. So if you're someone who thinks that you would like the pencil, you should probably get one too. And should you buy a used iPad? Listen, I know buying tech used on Marketplace is intimidating, but this is Apple stuff we're talking about. It's built really well. You can tell right away by looking at an item how it's been cared for. You can usually tell if it's been dropped or has scratches. If it looks like it's in great condition and boots up just fine, chances are it will last a long time. So if you're shopping around, don't be afraid to buy and shop used. You might be able to get a higher model for your budget. But if you can afford new, it's always nice. Heck, if you can afford it, the Air is really nice. The Pro is insane. But if, like me, this might be your first iPad and you haven't upgraded in years, honestly, the 9th gen iPads are just fantastic and they are the best value around. If you want the best, cheapest iPad right now and like the camera on the top instead of on the side, get the 9th gen. If you want a better screen and don't mind the camera on the side and maybe can get it on sale or used, get the 10th gen. If you have extra money and like the newer screen and want the better chip and the camera on the top, get the Air. The Air is dope. Just get the best deal you can. Any one of those three are just awesome. There will likely be new iPads available around the corner. While it does make your purchase from a couple of years ago feel kind of obsolete, they're really not that much of a difference as far as performance goes for your daily usage. I'm enjoying the iPad 10 a lot, and I think most people would too. What about you? What tablet do you use and why? And which iPad, if any, would you currently recommend? I think the minis are neat, but for anyone over 40 with them older eyes, it's nice to have the bigger screens. And the Pros are sick, but they cost a lot, and the performance might be overkill for most people. I think they nailed it with the Air, but I just don't feel like it's worth the extra cost for me, and I feel like I probably need more performance than the average user, so I think the good old-fashioned regular iPad is still the one to get. If you missed my video where I switched from Windows to Mac, check that out here. Otherwise, maybe watch this video next. As always, thanks for watching. Thanks for the support with all the comments, likes, and subscribes, and we'll see you next time on The Sad Life.